Well, good morning, everyone, and it is an honor to be presenting to you today. Before I begin, I wanted to echo the admiration expressed by other participants about the quality of the presentations by everyone is just so good, and of course, it always is with CART info. So today I will talk about teaching to modern day students as from the standpoint of how my colleague Elena Dashligina and I see it. First, let's quickly overview the macro trends that we're up against as educators. You are, of course, all very well aware of these things, but I think it's helpful to summarize quickly. So first of all, what kinds of students are entering our classrooms today? The Gen Zers, right? The digital natives who from about age 5 or so are pretty much joined at the hip with their electronic devices and with multiple ones at that. They are juggling multiple streams of social media and also immediately delivered on-demand entertainment. Lots and lots of screen time. A number of serious studies have concluded that those high amounts of screen time lead with time to higher levels of anxiety and higher levels of compliance, as well as weaker sense of independence. Another conundrum is that young people, and actually all people, are constantly exposed to this pretty much picture-perfect lives of others, on Facebook, on Instagram, yada yada. So, well, the reason why they're picture-perfect lives is because they are carefully curated picture streams, and we tend to erroneously conclude from that that we ourselves are the only ones to have problems and everybody else is living a wonderful life. So this leads to a double whammy in terms of empathy. On one hand, being clueless that others in reality are juggling the same amount of problems as we are, and also feeling that others can't possibly relate to our hardships because everything is so easy peasy for them. So in our practice over the last 5 to 7 years, we've also noticed that students have become more forgetful than before, probably due to the increasingly split attention. And then they have less initiative to resolve seemingly simple obstacles, and also they fall through on assignments, oftentimes without really feeling any guilt or anything at all about it. Like, what's the big deal? Online communication, which there is more and more of, is also jacking the emotional side of communication. It is obviously less expressive online than face-to-face. And for example, in an online classroom, for me, it just drives me up the wall that students are very resistant to turning on their cameras, because when they don't turn on their cameras, it really robs others of all visual clues in a setting which is already obviously low on clues, because we're trying to swim around in a foreign language that we're just learning. Okay, so now as to the current trends in education. So more and more of communication is happening online, and more of teaching is also happening online. Makes sense because it's cheaper, more streamlined, and can be more streamlined, but also non-dynamic education delivery. A smaller and smaller share of the curricula is allowed for the humanities. So ironically, today is actually day-to-day second anniversary of True Commitment, a highly damaging strategic overhaul at our workplace, the University of Tulsa, which set to go ahead and eliminate up to 40% of programs at our university. And of course, the vast majority of those were arts and sciences programs. So there's less space for languages and less space for critical thinking skills to grow and develop. So in a way, today, critical thinking is also stymied by the ease and convenience of finding answers to myriads and myriads of questions online. And I'm really a victim to this as well, that when we can't readily find an answer to something, we can kind of go into angry or shutdown mode. What do you mean? Or we can't find the answer right away. But employers actually want employees who are not only willing, but to wrestle with problems that don't have an immediate solution, but have, beyond that, an embracing attitude about it. A well-known neurologist, Tatiana Chernigovskaya, has some very interesting thoughts on the state of human brain currently versus artificial intelligence. So she claims that the only areas, and she claims this with quite a lot of persuasiveness and in a lot of details, that the only areas where humans remain at an advantage to machines currently are emotions, empathy, and the ability to synthesize ideas across completely different modes of informational intake and brain work. So that's what we need to be focusing on to stay ahead and better than machines. So within that current landscape, what are we specifically trying to do? So the pedagogical method that we use is the affective-semantic approach, which was developed by a Russian scientist and linguist and pedagogue, Igor Shekhter. And its core tenets are nurturing affective aspects of communication, nurturing critical thinking skills, and nurturing language appropriation. So basically where a learner starts thinking of language as my own. The affective-semantic approach aims at creating a state of relaxed concentration in which then optimum learning activity can occur. So here you can see a picture, for example, from the Russian Studies room at TU, where most of our classes take place. There's the rocking chairs and the calm colors, but more importantly, it's the atmosphere of comfort all around. And students do tell us time and again that they kind of view the Russian class within their semester schedule as the opportunity to break up the tense pace and kind of recharge between other classes that are really much more hard-charging and tense. And one student even once called a Russian class the chicken soup for the soul. And then, of course, when you have more relaxed students, they are also the ones who are more ready to share, to open up, to reflect. And of course, the concentration part of relaxed concentration works best in the classroom when students can sort of subconsciously feed off of each other in terms of maintaining concentration. So how do we work to nurture the empathetic part of a student's personality while simultaneously having them learn the language? So one way that remains super important is expressive reading. And as you can see here, there's a lot of technicalities given. So we work with dialogical texts a lot, having students read on behalf of characters, but also anchoring it back to their own experiences and also ramping up the expressivity over time. As we mentioned earlier, sharing. If they can share, then the language can develop and thrive within that. So another road to empathy is through encouraging sharing. And I included these buttons here to kind of boil down the techniques just to the keyword overriding phrases. For example, the most reliable way, of course, to break that initial giant hesitancy of a new language learner to start speaking is when they want to share about something that they're passionate about. They're so passionate about it that they just cannot remain quiet any longer. So after this primary level, interviews are extremely important, and they are our key assignment on all levels. Many students say in their course evaluation post-course that they really enjoyed preparing and doing the interviews. Asking the why questions repeatedly and also peppering the conversation with very lively reactions such as «Не может быть! Правда? Вот это да! Ну и ну!» also shows empathy. Key elements of develop. Now let's talk about nurturing critical thinking skills. Okay, so key elements of developing critical thinking skills are, number one, again, asking the why question. So I mentioned on the previous slide from the standpoint of showing empathy and showing a desire to learn about the person. Here I'm mentioning it because this forces students to talk further and to analyze, to find answers to questions that oftentimes we find they never even realize that they should think about. Asking follow-up questions. You can think of them as kind of the side roads for the brain as opposed to taking the highway. So this is the scenic route because they're unscripted, they're in the moment, and they're the adaptation to the constantly changing informational map on what a person is learning. Then also expressing opinion, being pushed to express their point of view, and not only to express it, but also to defend it. Boom, 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 boom. And then also the compare and contrast approach. Lots and lots of compare and contrast. Because our students are kind of at a high chance of living in silos, as we talked about earlier, and by the way, the pandemic has really worsened this a lot, our job is to help them get to the same denominator with each other. And so live interaction in groups or pairs by far takes the highest share of class time for us and remains key. Okay, it's at the heart of everything. And mixing students around also enables them to grow comfortable with everybody else in the class, to adapt to different people's work styles and tempos, but also it allows us to see who has the best compatibilities that can lead to best pairings later at for some certain assignments. So we don't think of it as teaching only to communicate well in Russian, but broader is obviously teaching to communicate well overall. And we would be bereft not to talk about the importance of teaching the Russian world as a whole, because language is absolutely unimaginable without the cultural background in which it stews on a daily basis, in which or within which it functions. So here, obviously, we're up against two challenges. With some learners, there's just no knowledge about the Russian world. With other learners, there's some knowledge, but maybe some of it is wrong knowledge, which is fed by stereotypes or some disinformation. So kind of like the bears walking in the streets or Russia is a sheet of ice. Not. And so there are many techniques here that we use by showing a lot of current events, news reports, life scenes. It has to be visually nutritious, and especially materials are optimal that are video materials, but they do have a transcript in Russian that can be looked over again and again. Also, of course, showing people on the streets, especially if they're peers. Accounts of expatriates are also, they also go over well with students in live sessions, like one, for example, shown here. We have a former student here who then got a Fulbright to teach English and Russian. Spent a year in Ulyanovsk, connecting with our students via video conference, obviously, because he was in Russia at the time. So the outcomes, right? Let's talk about what the students walk away with at the end. So this semester, actually, we have 3 back-to-back in-depth presentations that tailor to students' professional and academic interests. So first, a presentation on Russian hackers by a computer science major, and after researching, he himself actually diagnosed how complex the landscape is, and he is now very fascinated specifically with Russian hacktivists. We have a presentation on family happiness through the perusal of classical literature, and actually that presentation is coming up on Karta in just a few minutes. And also one on the economic devastation in Russia of the 90s, and that's by an econ major. So all of these presentations, when they were made, they led to very animated discussion in the classroom. Even though they were presented, they had to be presented online, still, even that led to very animated discussion. We talked about interviews, but also often questions brought up in class or material is shown leads to further very confessional, very thoughtful reflections in students' journals. They continue musing on the topic there. And of course, we have the end of semester integrative creative group projects that bring together the sum total of language acquired and make students wear multiple hats, right? Make plenty of decisions in a team setting. So it all paves the way for language appropriation. Learners feel a growing sense of closeness with the language, a realization that's a valuable tool to address their needs and equips them to navigate life. So here is one particular example, a recent one too. We have a Qatari petroleum engineer named Salman who graduated from TU and was hired by Schlumberger and sent for a year to work at Pythiach. So you can see where it is on the map of the Russian Federation, and he writes to us, the communication with the Russian people is good. I can easily do my daily activities without any problems, like shopping, ordering food from restaurants, flying from the airports. All what I have learned from you during the classes was very valuable. It indeed helped me to live here without any language problems. And if that is the result we can achieve with every student, then our work here is done. Thank you very much for your attention.